I don't know if it tells everybody or not. But
it does.
all right, Miguel, why don't you go next?
Yes, I'm Miguel Garcia. I work for Idonex, that's the Mexican subsidiary for an Spanish company, O&S, and I have more or less 2 years working in RPA and had some good experiences with some bank and other companies.
Awesome, thank you. Nice to have you join us. Luke? Luke, your voice is not coming through. I see you're unmuted, but we can't hear you. All right, we'll come back to you, Luke. Diane?
Yeah, Diane Zillis from Oshkosh Corporation. I believe we've been using UiPath for 3+ years. I've been with the team for just a few months as a business analyst, so still learning lots.
Welcome, and I think you are right. I think it has been about 3 years. So I remember we were kind of coming on a little. You guys are kind of coming on a little bit after us, so.
Okay, yeah.
Ryan, we'll have you go next.
I work at Marshall Clinic Health Systems with Joe, and as he mentioned, we've been learning UiPath for about a year now.
Welcome. And Christopher?
Hey everybody, Christopher Wilkinson here. I'm a senior customer success manager with UiPath. I've been doing the automation thing with UiPath for 4 years now. So happy to be with you today.
Thank you, Christopher. We'll do formal introductions in just a little bit. Tim?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name's Tim. I am a sales engineer here at UiPath. Been here about a year, but I've been in sort of the RPA space for quite a bit longer doing implementation work. And I am aligned with Jason Else. So if he's your AE, I'm the guy to talk to, I guess, if you have any technical questions or new products. Happy to be here.
All right. Thank you, Tim. Lily?
Hi, everyone. I'm Lily Wellington, work for A.O. Smith. And we have been, I think we're just under a year with the robotic space, and just excited to kind of ramp it up. And this is my first meeting, so appreciate the invite.
Absolutely. Welcome, Lily. And Liz?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Liz Valenta. I'm with Plexus with Angie. We've been using RPA, like she said, a little bit over 4 years. I am our technical systems analyst, so I do our administration, development, and as well as take care of our upgrades and work with UiPath when we have things that we need.
Excellent. Thank you, Liz. Suha?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
We can.
My name is Suha Habaj. I work as a RBA lead at Oshkosh Corporation. I've been with Oshkosh for around 2 years, and I've been working with document understanding, creating bots with UiPath, and so forth.
Excellent. Thank you, Suha. Jason? Jason, you're muted if you're trying to talk.
Oh, there we go. Can you hear me now?
We can.
I was double muted, which is probably good sometimes. So, thank you for inviting and allowing us to present today. But I'm here in Wisconsin and here to help you with all your UiPath needs.
Excellent. Cheryl? Cheryl, you're muted if you're trying to talk.
I'm Cheryl Martinez from US Venture. I'm a senior developer here, and we've been working with RPA for the past couple of years.
Yeah, I'm glad you were able to join, Cheryl. I know you're having some difficulties, so.
Yes, I was.
And then we'll go to Ryan next.
Hi, I'm Ryan. I'm with Oshkosh Corporation. Been here over a year, just over a year. I just took on the role as RPA rep for our Treasury Department, and just starting to learn about RPA a little more.
All right, excellent. And let's try to go back to Luke. Luke, is your voice working?
Can you hear me now?
We can.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm Luke, working at Generac Power Systems as an RPA development intern. I've been using UiPath for about 6 months, but Generac's been using it for a little over 2 years.
Nice. And welcome, Luke.
And on to Luke. I hear from Tim Dixon that and the Generac team that he is outstanding as an intern. So as a good tale for those out there who are looking for good RPA development talent, look at interns.
Yes.
Luke is a great story and has really dived in and is doing outstanding. So just if you want to talk to Tim and team about how to find a great intern like Luke, definitely would recommend that.
Thank you, Jason. Very, very much appreciated.
Yeah, you bet.
Yes, and I would second that around interns. We also had hired an intern almost 2 years ago now. His name's Kai, and he started out as an intern and just absolutely flourished in this area. He's now an employee with us, working on RPA amongst other things, and had very good luck with that. So, Jason, thanks for bringing that up. And Luke, I have heard great things about you as well. Definitely, if you're looking for some short-term assistance and looking to expand in RPA, the internships give the college students some really good experience, and typically there's really good experience or really good projects in that get done over the summer or sometimes even during the school year. If you can hire them on and keep them on part-time during the school year, it really works out well. All right. I am going to go ahead and introduce Christopher. Christopher, do you want to present, or would you like me to present your slides for you?
I made one slight change or two, so I'll try and present. And if I get a failure or something, maybe you can back me up.
All right, sounds good. So if you want to start sharing your screen while I introduce you, that'd be fantastic.
Sure thing.
All right, so like Christopher said, he is a senior customer success manager at UiPath. And he has experience in helping large clients in various industries with their digital transformation. His most recent experiences involve playing a key role in assisting clients with their RPA initiatives, i.e., UiPath, ultimately ensuring a smooth and robust implementation and rollout. He's adaptive, trusted, and detail-oriented professional with a history of working efficiently with cross-functional teams. Christopher will be talking to us today about the COE, as well as he will be sharing with us a little bit about governance as well.
Hey, thanks for the intro, Angie. I have a question. So I'm seeing quite a flicker
Yes,
on my
we are
feedback.
too.
You see that as well? Okay, let me stop sharing and we'll try that again.
Thought maybe you're just trying to highlight, how great you were with the flashing of your.
Sorry about that. That was extreme. Okay, new platform.
Right. Much better.
Yeah. So good to be with you today. I'm still trying to forget about that Packers loss in London. I think I mostly wiped it from my memory and look forward to the next one, hopefully with a better outcome.
Thanks for bringing that up, Christopher.
So hey, that's me. Live in Chicago, but spent a lot of time in my childhood in Wisconsin. So I have a question. So I know we have to end the meeting 15 minutes early. How much time do you need before the meeting actually ends, Angie? You said there was some additional content that you want to get into?
Only if there's time. So I want you to take as much time as you need. The rest I can always do via email. I was just going to talk a little bit about the Forward 5 experience, and it sounds like the majority of the people on the call were not in attendance to that. So I will be sending out an email after this, just trying to find out what people want to hear more about. So I'll put in my plug now, and then you can take the rest of the time, Christopher. What I'd like to know from everybody is, and you can use the chat if you want, what the highlights were of Forward 5 and what you'd like to learn more about. And then in our December meeting, we will be having UiPath come again. And I don't know who yet. It all depends on what topics we want to hear more about. And Jason will help us get the right people in the room to talk deeper into some of the topics that everybody's interested in. So whether you were at Forward 5 or not, please either leave in the chat message or send me an email what it is you'd like to hear more about, and we'll get that scheduled for our December meeting. All right. So Christopher, the rest of the time is yours.
Very good, very good. So we had a request to talk about RPA governance, audit, and security. So we're going to spend some time doing that. Timothy Kim is here. He's going to serve as kind of a technical resource. I think he's got to bounce kind of in the middle for maybe 30 minutes, but he's here now and then he'll be back. So let's make this conversational. And if you have kind of questions about higher level or technical, go ahead and just shout out those questions. All good. So very high level on this though. 2 of the big 4 accounting firms have actually deployed UiPath for every single one of their employees. So what it comes down to is, I think the auditors and in governance, the folks doing that full time, they actually prefer automation. It doesn't make mistakes and everything is logged. So that's kind of the story in a nutshell. And then after I go through a few slides on how to do governance properly in RPA automation, I have a whole deck just on audit use cases actually. So if 2 of the big 4 audit firms are giving it to every single one of the employees, why are they doing that and what are they doing? So we'll talk a little bit about that. Okay. So this is a high-level overview about governance and compliance. These are all the things necessary to think about, 1 through 6. I won't read them off, but these shouldn't be like new concepts, right? So bot identity and credential management, user access review, etc. So as we go through each of these, please ask questions if you have them. But at a high level, again, usually the robots, again, they don't make human mistakes. They're following some logic, and unlike a human where you might not be able to log every keystroke and click or even take a screenshot, you can do that with the robot, okay, with the automation. So for bot identities, here's a bunch of guidelines on how to do your robot credentials. Some of the key points are, you want them to have their own credential, not just borrow somebody's, not just borrow a human employee's credential, for example. Attended automation is a little bit different. We can talk about that later, but you want traceability, role management, audit, and inventory. So hopefully that makes sense. There's a note here about 2-factor authentication. Let me hit on that. So certain logins or many logins today, you could say require 2-factor authentication. So a couple of things about that. It shouldn't really ever hold up automating something. One is you really could, in a lot of cases, automate the 2-factor authentication, meaning have the robot go through that. But the reality is, a lot of times you can go to whoever has that 2-factor authentication turn on and explain the use case. Say, hey, I'm doing a business automation here for this purpose. Can you shut that 2-factor authentication off for this? Because it's really not necessary. It's not humans involved. So that's usually what we coach customers to do. And usually when the customers reach out to whatever entity that is, whether external or internal, and say, hey, this is business automation, you can shut that two-factor authentication off. Okay. But again, don't use employees' credentials for your robots in an unattended scenario. Okay. In automation today, you can get really fancy with how you structure your robot team. There's a myriad of ways to do that. I'll send these slides out so you have the guidelines. So here it talks about naming conventions for the different things. So naming conventions for service accounts, naming conventions for the VM names and VM users. Okay. The rule of minimum access applies for these accounts. So don't give one of these robot accounts access to everything. Just have them get access to the minimum things they need. So we usually don't, for example, have a robot doing both finance automations and HR automations. Usually each department often has their own robot or at least separate credentials with different sets of permissions. Okay, again, it comes back to the rule of minimum access. Any questions so far?
I had a quick question, Christopher. We've had to actually do some segregation of duties, kind of control. It's all kind of in the financial services space, but we've got a bot who's setting up and applying ACH payments, but also a bot who can write credits on a customer account. And so we kind of had to go through that GRC process. Are you seeing that within that finance space? It's a little bit different than, an HR bot and a finance bot. These are kind of technically all finance bots, but still creating that conflict.
Yeah, you still have to do the segregation of duties. So Tim, are you still here by chance?
I am.
Do you know in the latest modern folder setup, can a robot switch the credentials it's using per automation, or do you really have to stick with one credential set per robot?
I'm not sure. I can dig into that a little bit, but just from prior implementation experience, yeah, Christopher's right. Like, if there is a need for segregation of duties within a department itself, right, you could essentially use two different robot IDs that have the correct permissions assigned to them, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think for full optimization, though, we weren't able to do that. And so we ended up just kind of creating kind of a lot of mitigating controls, like, bots following scripted, tasks. It can't go rogue, kind of, dialogue around that. So we just ended up documenting it in GRC and just kind of passing on it. But I wondered if that's something that anyone else had experienced so far.
Yeah, I would just say that from our team's perspective, we definitely had a lot of challenge with our finance team. And I don't mean challenge in a negative way, just challenging the thoughts and the process. And we had a lot of discussions around if a bot's doing it anyway, what does it matter if it's a unattended bot being kicked off, whether it had, what permissions it has, but ultimately we ended up with, for each part of the segregation of duties, we do have to have a separate user account that logs in. I don't think we've had any automations yet where we needed to use two different credentials within one process. We typically will separate those processes. But I will say, I don't know if you mentioned or not, that when we use the accounts, we also integrate with CyberArk so that we can pull those credentials from a secure location. So just wanted to throw that in as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about that on the slide, but yeah, I think in general, I'm hearing there is segregation of duties is important. You're saying, well, how we're doing a mitigating control is we're using logic and then logging as a control there, which I think would pass an audit.
Right.
Essentially,
Right.
you know.
We'll see, right?
Right. And that you can, if they say, hey, I want to prove it to me, you can say, hey, you know, check this logs. You got 100% sample
Right.
size. Go check it out. So
Right.
that sounds, I think you're approaching it the right way there.
Mhm.
Yeah. Related, another thing I want to say is I would never automate a human approval gate. So say there's a business rule before automation. There's a business rule that, hey, if we make this outbound payment, it has to go to a manager, director, or P&L owner, or whatever, if it's above a certain amount, to sign off on that. You know, normally if it's a human approval gate you wouldn't normally automate that. But our technology easily allows you to do human in the loop with this Action Center product. You can send it in any automation. You can send something that requires human review to this Action Center. They can review it, and then it sends it right back into the automation after the human reviews it and rejects or approves it. So just keep that in mind too. Okay, so this is a little bit about credential management in credential stores. So we see all kinds of credential stores being used, and we support, I think, pretty much most all of them. In modern times, like, hey, what is best of breed security? You know, we talk about things like segregation of duties and having specific accounts with specific permissions for the robots to meet rule of minimum access. But the reality is, I think credential password rotation is the modern way to do security. And these credential stores allow you to do that, and that we see that very commonly. So essentially just, you know, I have a lot of security background. There's always a chance that credentials could get compromised if you're rotating those regularly, kind of in a way that someone's not going to guess what the next password is. That adds a lot of security, and we definitely recommend that. Okay. So, if you're still doing if you have any beyond a handful of robots and you're still doing robot credential management kind of manually without a credential store, I would look to upgrade that. Use a credential manager. Angie, how's that experience going for you? I know the technology works, but
Yeah, it's going well. We have set it up with, like I said, we use our CyberArk for our credential manager. It works very seamlessly once we get everything set up. And then it works well because we can create service accounts, like you said, for that minimal, least, or most restrictive, I should say it that way, most restrictive user account. And then we can build those right into the bot. So it works out very well.
Out of curiosity, are most people on here using, at least in their organizations, some sort of credential manager, third party like that, like Lieberman Red or CyberArk, or the actual UiPath credential store?
Mm-hmm.
Out of security, no one's going to mention what they're using. They're just going to be quiet about it.
I think we are not the UiPath store, but an external for all the applications, and then we just added this in. Is that I'm not an IT person, obviously, but yeah, I think we're using a separate software for that.
Got it.
good. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. Again, we'll share this for reference so you can review later. We've talked about this, but all the humans involved, so the operators, the admins, most all of them will need some segregation of permissions as well, unless it's maybe the super admin. But finance operators maybe should only have access to finance and vice versa. Also, we really recommend having separate environments for production and development, and often even test as a third environment on its own. So if you're doing everything just in one production environment, you might want to consider that differently. Now, if you're in cloud, it's usually all the same cloud instance, but you can set up separate tenants for this type of thing. And also the last bullet, if you're not doing this, usually developers don't have access to production. Usually you have a separate person that promotes code to production once you beyond that getting started phase. User access reviews, it's no different for any credentials involved in automation, whether it's robot accounts or the accounts for the folks doing the administration and the operations. All right, so actually, if you're automating anything that falls under SOX, this will hit on an audit as well. So just don't forget about that. And accurate automation logging. There's a lot here, but essentially everything can be logged to at whatever detail you want, and there's a lot of advantages to logging everything. And FYI, if you have like PII and/or PHI data, you can do masking of data, whatever data fields you need to in logged line items. So another way to say that is, if you're automating PII and PHI, you can still log everything and you can mask or scramble whatever elements you want in those log line items. So don't be shy about making logs.
The masking, is that there's like automated functions that built in to do that for you?
Yeah, I'm not a great developer by any means, but essentially what happens is kind of when you're creating automation in Studio, and at that activity level, you can kind of click on it and say, you can pick and choose what you want to mask. So there's an option field for scramble this or mask the log line item.
And on this topic of obfuscation, if any of you are using task capture to create documentation, when those screenshots occur in task capture, you can also choose to obfuscate certain fields so that they're blurred out.
Thanks.
A few more items on governance. So in development, especially for unattended automation, it's pretty important to use a framework. The most popular one is RE framework. We really recommend using that. If you're not, it also helps with automation reliability along with many other things. As you do DevOps, it is also helpful to use like a project management platform to help you just track and trace everything, and that'll help you be able to report on how you move things through the development cycle. And we also have CI/CD integrations of all types, if that's of interest to you, if you have a tool that tries to enforce that. With citizen developers, different story. We'll get into that later if we have time. But standard, for these large unattended type automations, kind of using proper DevOps helps a lot with governance. And a note on SOX and business critical automations. First of all, this is very common, and it could be that most all your unattended automations are SOX business critical automations. There's no problem at all with that. Our platform's designed to handle that. Here's some tips to keep in mind, so some best practices as you automate those. But you'll see that data masking is part of that. I think, as touched on earlier, it's nice to have these things automated with UiPath because of the compliance you can enforce with the logic and the logging and the rules associated. But hey, make sure you're following all these things in orange. So you might want to use dedicated VMs and robots for those. Make sure you have security around all the things related, and also make sure you're doing the proper reporting on the production running and the development itself.
Christopher?
Mm-hmm.
On your previous slide, you were talking about a development framework. Can you give me an example of what you mean by that?
Yeah. Does RE framework mean anything to you?
It does not to me.
Okay, all good. What it means is, like, if you go into Studio, which is our professional developer tool,
Yep.
it's very powerful and it's also pretty easy to use. So you can go in there and quite quickly just throw things together, and that's fine if you're experimenting or maybe doing a citizen automation. But when you are developing something that's kind of business critical and supposed to be highly available and very reliable and with the proper logging, there's all these best practices and kind of these checklists you need to follow to make sure you're doing things in the right way. So we have these basically templates that you load in there, and it's a framework for an automation with all that important stuff built in.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, yeah. There are different templates depending on what you're doing. Most unattended kind of big automations use RE framework. There is a different one for document understanding. There's a different one for attended, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But if you're not using one at all, I would highly recommend that you get one.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So some of the benefits, it has some logging built in. It has frameworks for like error handling, for example. So it all ties together in best practices.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So again, we talked about best practices for business critical automations and even those that are similar. But this is not to scare anybody off. This is encouraged. It's just, hey, when you're doing something important, let's follow best practices. Okay. So that's it in a nutshell. That's very high level. I really like this deck though, because it just 10 slides or so. It shows you all of the really key best practices to follow. So hopefully that was helpful, but I have a lot more material on how automation can be used in the audit space, and we can even get into citizen development. So how would we like to go from here? Do you want me to get into that additional material on automation and audit, or more conversation on what we just looked at? While I'm switching slide decks out here, can I ask, has anyone had any trouble with their compliance department where people are like, oh, I'm not sure if we want to automate that for reason X, Y, Z?
No, but I have a question for you on the critical process. You have one tenant in VM, dedicated tenant in VM, but for our production, we only have one tenant. So like, are you suggesting like for finance stuff that it would have its own tenant eventually? Or
So everyone's got a different opinion on this. The reality is, in the most latest versions of UiPath, probably for the last year or 18 months, everything is designed to be run in a single tenant, really, at least for example, for production. So why I say that is, you can, with the modern folders capability we have, you can really take one tenant and split it up security wise, whichever way you want. So usually separate tenants are not required unless you're separating like production from dev or production from test. So I know that could be a little bit misleading.
okay, I got you, because we have one production tenant and it's in modern folders, and we have each department in its own folder with its own security. So
Yeah, before modern folders, I think it was definitely true. You probably want to consider using more tenants, but these days, not really necessary.
thank you.
Mm-hmm. Good. So are we interested in hearing a little bit about automation and audit?
Yeah.
Good. All right.
Yes.
So we'll get into this content. And again, some of the question you can have in mind is, why did 2 of the big 4 deploy this, right? I'm a former auditor myself, so I can make some commentary on that. So first section, I think we all know what RPA is, so I won't spend too much time on that. But we'll spend more time on how is RPA transforming audit today and in the future, how the RPA platforms are evolving to meet the needs of audit, and then some use case examples. This is an interesting slide. Hopefully you've seen it. If you haven't, you might want to screenshot it because it's a lot of the outcomes that can come from automation. A lot of times it's not just hour savings. You can see here, reduce compliance cost and risk. I think I'm seeing this more and more. Like we automated that thing to help with compliance and less errors. And then it can even help the audit team. Just a quick review, that automation can do a lot of different things. And this continues to grow as we have more of these automatic document understanding tools and different things like Reinfer, which can read thousands of emails and tell you in your shared inbound inbox what all these people are asking for. Pretty interesting. And keep saying this, but I really feel we're at the point where any business process that has any volume at all, if it's not automated already, it'll be looked at for digital transformation and automation. Like, how can we get this out of the manual world? It's probably, I don't know, I think we're probably halfway into it with another half of the business process to be looked at. I know a lot of you are living and breathing this every day, but I just think it's the reality. So we might as well tackle automation now instead of being late to the game. Okay, RPA and audit. Oops. So pretty high level, but in audit, if you've never done it before, it's especially in Sarbanes-Oxley related audits, it's really tedious work. So you have business processes out there that could be in the numbers of like millions of transactions per year. And the idea is you want to go out there and make sure they're compliant and the numbers are right on them. But you come to this problem in that you really want to make sure the whole business process is working 100% in compliance and that all the calculations are correct. But sometimes the sample size, you might only be able to look at 1% of those transactions, just because it's manual to go and check in transaction X, did it follow the process flow? Were all the rules followed? And were the numbers right? It's very, very tedious. But if all the kind of logs and transaction information are available, a lot of times that audit work is extremely logical and you're following a flow. So basically you can create automations to go follow this process for you. So that's where these benefits come from, right? So you get sometimes auditors get burnout, right? Could be tedious work. So if that's automated, the auditors then they're doing better at their jobs and it's less stressful. So they're a lot happier. Also, you know, if the audits are better and you're covering more sample size, that's better for the business, right? Hopefully everything is perfect in your business already. An audit doesn't find anything anyway, but if there is anything out there to find, they have better sample size coverage and you just generally get more assurance. Okay. So I think you can kind of to get the picture there, but yeah, better compliance. And I'm not going to read every bullet on the slide, but there's a lot you can look at. So if we with this, so you can automate your data gathering, automated assessment of risk and in risk rating, all kinds of stuff. Again, I'll provide this for review and for reference. But even automatic reporting out. So, hey, I checked all these compliance factors and these were the results. And oh, by the way, I did 100% sample size. So that sort of thing is kind of unheard of in audit before, unless you wrote a program in a non-drag and drop way to do this, which I've seen a little bit of in the past, but usually you need a professional developer to do that sort of thing. With UiPath, it's different. You know, you can just be a business user and just have knowledge on the tool and be able to do some of these amazing things. We used to call it continuous audit in one department audit department I was in, and someone wrote something, and it was like the difference in made in what we were covering and doing with compliance was like night and day. All that is possible now for the business user. So it's good to look at the before and after. So today, often in compliance and audit, you have limited data sample tested just because you're doing manual testing with a human, which is just time consuming and expensive and tedious. And we talked about manual. So it's a nice best effort. It's just not an efficient way to approach it. And compared to the ideal state, you're looking at 100% sample size or 100% population tested in a continuous manner, which would never happen with a human. You would never hire enough people to do that, really. It just wouldn't be feasible. So also, if you're automating, if something is automated, not done manually by a human, you have built-in controls, essentially, is what that's saying. Okay. How is this landing so far? It's kind of a new idea for some. Is this, maybe it helps you with some compliance audit questions that come up. But I think at minimum, this should help you think about how if you are going to an audit or compliance department that's not used to automation, they start asking questions, it should be able to help you answer some of those questions. Is that landing?
I think so.
Right. A lot of material in this deck, so we'll flip through some things kind of quickly. But if we want to have more conversation on any of this, please just bring it up. So here's a framework. I don't know if any of you have heard about automated testing yet. So now UiPath has this whole test product. We call it Test Suite. Most of the functionality is built in our studio. So if you've ever heard of like continuous test for deployments or automated testing tools, like they released the first, it wasn't a Gartner quadrant, it was another rating department that rates kind of modern cloud-based test tools, and we actually got, in the first time we were rated as the leader in the category. Kind of interesting. So with this functionality, you can do things like production monitoring. So you can do dummy test transactions in production continuously. So if an automation happens to break, if you have this dummy test transaction going maybe once every 10 minutes or once an hour, you might get an alert that the automation is broke. So, hey, please go fix this automation before the next scheduled production run to reduce any outage time. So the product has all that functionality now. If you're interested in talking more about that, you can just reach out to any of us, but it's pretty powerful. But you can even do pre-production testing for that as well. I'm sure no one here has ever experienced, hey, there's a systems change. Can you retest your automation to see if it still works? It's supposed to help with that quite a bit. All right, how is the platform changing to handle this? So what does a robot on everyone's desktop look like? And the product changes quickly, so it looks even more slick than this. But say you're a business user and auditor, UiPath lives in your system tray now, and if you click on it, you can get a list of all the automations that either you built yourself or someone pushed to you. So here's an example of a auditor at one of the big four, and here's their automations that they have built for them to run, or maybe they even built them themselves. These are usually attended automations, so they can just kind of click on it, and maybe it's built with a form or whatever, so it asks them a few questions about, hey, what do you want me to run this automation against? And it's all dynamic for you right in front of your screen. We have tools like process mining and kind of similar task mining that can look at any process and the data for that process and say, hey, this is what you expect to happen in a happy path, but here's actually what your process looks like. Which is pretty helpful to look at processes that might be slower than usual. You don't know why, or you're looking really just to make a process more efficient. It's kind of hard to see here, but essentially it might say, hey, normal cases through this process that are on the happy path really only take 2 days, but the average process time is much slower than that because of this weird exception flow that happens for 40% of them. Like this approval gate is always taking 7 days, and it'll show you that visually. And oh, by the way, it'll highlight things that might be ripe candidates for automation. So if you've never looked at any of that technology, again, the two products are process mining and task mining, pretty powerful. This is a nice example of kind of the Action Center product, or another name for it is Validation Station. It's the human in the loop tool. So say you have that human approval gate that shouldn't be automated. This is how the system enables that. So this is an example from Document Understanding, but essentially it's the automation is doing its thing, and it says, hey, I really need a human to look at this to either verify it or make a decision on something or both. This is a nice picture of it. Basically, this is probably an invoice, and it's automatically reading the invoice. And the point here is it wants the human to look at all this stuff that it pulled off the invoice just to verify that it worked correctly. So as you can see here, it looks like it pulled all the data accurately. So you'd hit save and move that transaction forward through the rest of the automation. So if this is new to you, I would really pay attention to this, because in most cutting edge automations, we see a lot of this human in the loop stuff. We see a lot of kind of apps or forms, kind of you interfacing with the automation as a human, not just kind of batch work. Okay.
With that needs to be running on their device. Is that true?
Luckily it doesn't. So it's actually web-based. So you'll get a URL, for example, that you can access for any web browser to do this, to go view this. And then you're like, well, hey, how do I know if anything's queued for me? Like, say I'm a director or higher level approver for something. How do I know if I have a queue of things I need to go look at in Action Center? And you can do email alerting for that. Probably some other alerting too, by the way, through the UiPath platform. But yeah, we alert the end users to say, hey, go check this out at this URL. There's actually an orchestrator app that runs on your phone that you can do some of this with too. So you can do notifications through that and do a bunch of things in orchestrator with that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just when we first started using Document Understanding, Action Center was a standalone, and then it moved so that it's a part of Action Center, and it kind of freaked us out because we're like, we don't want all of our users in Action Center. But then very quickly found out that there's a lot of things within Orchestrator that you can change who has access to what. And so that calmed our nerves and we were able to go forward. But if you haven't used it before, don't let that scare you, because there is ways where you can make it so all they can get at is Action Center and they don't get at anything else within Orchestrator.
Yeah, that's a good point. You can just have it to where this is the only thing they have access to and they can't see everything in there. They can only see things from maybe themselves or their team, however you want to set it up. Okay, this is getting into a lot of detail, but sorry about the automation there. But it's essentially a flow chart that says in audit, these are all the things you can look at. I have no idea why that's happening. I'm sorry. So I'll send out the slide. Let me see if I can. Let me do that a little different. Give me just a second.
And Christopher, just the time check, we got about 15 minutes.
Okay, sure thing. Question for the group. Is there interest in going through a similar type of deck for citizen development governance?
Yeah, I'd be interested in hearing about that.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think so. And also, I don't know, Christopher, if you've got anything to within any decks that you already have. One of the challenges that we've had is kind of figuring out how to document which updates in UiPath have to go to our change advisory board and that level of how do you document those, which type of changes go, which type of changes are immaterial. If that's within any existing slide decks you had, I'd be interested in something like that as well.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. So one thing I'll say on that is usually automations are automating some existing systems, right? So say you're automating, say you have the Epic e-medical record system. So in Epic, it's a very important business system. It's going to have its own change management process, right? For sure it will. So when you push a new version of Epic, that goes through change management board. The reality is, like any automations that are tied to that might break when that business system gets upgraded. So the first thing we coach our customers is you really need to integrate with the existing change management cycles for the business applications you are automating, because when they do changes, you need to go check the automations and retest them before they go to production anyway. So it's the first rule of thumb I would tell you is just use everybody else's change management cycle. Okay.
Yeah, that's a good point. That has happened to us for sure.
Yeah, it's usually a pretty early lesson folks learn is that, hey, they did this production change for XYZ system and now the automation's broken. Like, yeah, but they probably went through a QA cycle for their changes. Automations now are business critical. You really need to be in that change management and be in that QA cycle before that goes to production. I think that's the most important point for it. So I have a lot of cool examples in this deck of things organizations did in compliance. So why don't I'll share this out for you to read offline, and then we'll get into the citizen development compliance. So I'll just click through those problem statements and solutions. These are really kind of examples always lead to insights, I would say. And then a bunch for tax. So if you have everybody's got a tax department, it might be interesting for them to look at. All right. Thanks for going through that with me. We'll get into citizen development compliance. So how many of you are at least dabbling in citizen development?
We are 100% in. We have more citizen developers than we have IT developers.
Okay, very good. I would guess a lot of you are either doing it or at least thinking about it. You saw my slide earlier that everything that can be looked at for automation, digital transformation, I think will be. I think that's definitely true. With citizen development, I often use the Excel example. So, if I'm a fresh college grad coming to the workplace and I come to the workplace and they say, we're not going to give you Excel because we don't want to pay the $500 a year for that license. We need you to use a calculator and graph paper instead. I'm probably going to look at them and say, it's 2022. I'm not so sure that's going to work for me. It really, it's just expected that you have Excel. I think we're getting to that point with automation. So I'll use the intern example. I think we have at least one intern on the phone. So I have a customer that's not a tech company. It's really like a very large ag commodities and transportation business. They had like 12 interns in one department that wasn't a tech department, by the way. But for the 12 interns in their 2.5 months on the job, they were all required to kind of come up with an automation and build one and use it. They all did. They invited me to their end of internship presentation session where they did a kind of a show and share on what they did. All the automations were really amazing. They all had a lot of business value and they all lived on past when the interns went back to school. So think about those 12 interns. that really embrace automation, do you think when they finish school and go out into the workplace, will they ever really want to be without automation? I think the answer is no way. Any piece of work they look at in their career, they're going to think, if this is a manual thing, I want it calculated or automated or, not done manually, right? So that's why this is important. Even if you're not doing kind of citizen development or automation for the business user now, it'll be coming. People will be asking about it, right? So with automation, you're kind of doing build, manage, and run at the individual level, which isn't necessarily a problem. The key is here, usually they're only automating things for themselves. So everything is done in one environment. It's not like they build some little calculation for themselves or some data script for themselves and they have to send it to a separate non-production environment. Get it tested, doesn't work that way. It's similar to Excel. It's right there on your machine for you to do what you need. There's a lot of benefits to doing this. It basically increases the business value. Automation gives back to your business. And I think one thing to keep in mind is a lot of automations, they might be helpful, but they just don't have the business value for the COE and the professional developers to take on, but probably they should still be done. With system development, you can attack those in parallel with the work your COE is doing on the big unattended automations. Then everyone asks the next question, well, how do I do this at scale? My COE only has so many people and they're busy. When all these users have questions, I can't distract my COE members with all these inbound questions related to this stuff. So here's how that works in reality, how you can do this with hundreds of thousands of people. So the COE has their professional developers and they're usually 100% busy, at least doing their work in their high value unattended pipeline. We really want to do this with a separate set of people in parallel to all that other work that's going on. So you have citizen developers, which just might have Studio X or Studio and doing things for themselves. You also have a group of what we call just automation users. So these might be like the auditors we were looking at earlier, and there's some pre-built automations that they want access to. So they have no need to build anything themselves. They're really just automation users. They have that UiPath in their system tray with a list of things they can run. But what if they have questions or need modifications to their automations, etc.? The key linchpin that ties us all together is what we call SitDev power users. So these are probably people out in the business units, not in the COE, but people out in the business units that have a curiosity and some talent with the technology. And maybe they've had at least one coding class at some point in school or something they've taken on their own, and they have the ability. So these people do kind of the tech support. If this person creates an automation that would be great for their whole team to use, they hand it over to the SitDev power user, local department, say, hey, kind of check this through for quality and then share this out to all the automation users. But the COE is just not really involved in all this, except for maybe initial setup, but after initial setup, they're just off busy with their other work. So the idea is that we're going after the long tail. So the COE is doing fewer but high value automations, and the area of the graph here is business value. The employee driven automations can be just as valuable, just more of them and less value at an individual level. Okay, so see some key things in here. So how do you drive this in management at the system level? So the UiPath platform can handle all this for you. One key component is Automation Hub. So you can have automation set up so all the sit devs can put their automations in there. It gives them kind of a abbreviated question set, and it measures value on them pretty quickly on all these little individual automations. Also gets them in a list so you can kind of measure them and look at them. All right, so list of the next question then is,
well, I really want to govern this. I'm like, okay, that's great. We have the capability in the platform to govern it with as much governance and restrictions as you want. So this breaks that all down in detail, but essentially you can even get so restrictive as you can put a deny all in there, which means they can't automate against any URL and they can't automate against any application on their computer unless you specifically allow that. And that's enforced in real time. So you get such granular control, you can deny or allow whatever you want. Okay. The other key point is citizen automation runs on the user's computer or VDI, and it uses their credentials. So if you think about any user's credentials, it's audited and has restrictions on it already based on what that user's responsibility is. So those users aren't going to be able to automate anything they can't already do without automation by default because of their user credentials. So I think those are the highest level tenants. How is that landing? Or were you aware of that already?
Is that just in the cloud or is that
You can do either. The devil's in the details with what version you're running. And we can talk you through those details for your specific setup. Tim, are you still on the call by chance? No, he had to run.
Oh, I see. This is just for, is this for regular Studio as well? Like the one
It
like
could
our
be,
main developer
yes.
could use? Okay.
Studio X and Studio. You can pick and choose how you want to do it. So I'll get into a few details on that.
Sorry, Christopher. For the new web Studio Web, is that going to apply too? You know, because
sorry, yeah, Studio Web. It hasn't officially been released yet. I think it's a pretty safe assumption that it will have the governance restriction capability in it. It would be weird if they didn't include that. So we can confirm that when it releases.
Sorry, I'm back. Yeah, I don't know specifically what mechanisms they'll have, but it's designed for things like citizen development and for the new Automation Express offering that's going to come out. And so the idea is that sort of beginner or lighter automations will be written there. So I can't imagine that there wouldn't be any sort of governance. Yeah. Sorry, was that what you were talking about? I just kind of came in halfway through the conversation. Yeah. Okay.
All
cool.
good. No, thanks.
Thank you both.
And Tim, I also just shared, they were asking about the governance file. Doesn't matter if you're in cloud or on-prem. I just mentioned, so it has the capability in both. The devil's in the details on what version you're running, et cetera. And we can walk you through those details for your specific setup.
I'm going to throw the link to the doc in the chat. I don't know specifically, there's a local file, there can be an external file, there can be an asset in the orchestrator. Those are 3 different places that the file can exist. But all the information's in that link.
Yeah. And so there's a high level tenants. We'll share that. So there's also a workflow analyzer, which automatically checks the quality of code in addition to the governance file, if you want to do that. Not time to go through all this, but here's all the different controls and the different areas you can put on. But in short, you can get as granular with this as you want to. So I'll share for reference. So I think we're right at time. We're able to share kind of the high level tenets of this. Angie, I want to be respectful of the time slot. So
yeah, sounds like we're getting a lot of discussion around the citizen developer piece. Would it make sense? I guess just kind of a quick poll. Do you guys want to hear more about this? That maybe we invite Christopher back in our December meeting to talk a little bit more around citizen developer, or even have another session just on citizen development?
I would be more interested.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'd be interested in that. We're not using citizen development, but it's very intriguing. So it'd be nice to understand what others are doing.
Okay. I'll work with Christopher and we'll see what we can do to get another session set up so we can just focus on this piece, because I hate to cut the conversation short on this. It sounds like there's more conversation to be had.
Yeah. So we're happy to come back. We're happy to come back.
Okay. All
Okay.
right. I am going to have to cut us short. I apologize for that. But we will get Christopher back to talk about citizen development. I ask that everyone on the phone, and I'll also send out an email to everyone just reminding you, give me your topics that you would like us to dive a little bit deeper in, whether you heard about them at Forward 5 or if you didn't go to Forward 5 and you want to have us do a little bit deeper dive in a topic, please let us know. We are planning on having UiPath back in December, so we can hit on some of those. And then I will also be reaching out to various people based on our topics to find out if we can get speakers for those within our group as well, so that we can continue the collaboration that we have. So please feel free to reach out to me on that. And for now, I'll let everyone go. Have a great day, and we'll chat with you guys again later. I hope everybody received some golden nuggets out of this. I know that we did. And we thank you, Christopher and Tim, for your time.
Thank you.
Our pleasure. Nice to talk to you this morning.
All right. Thank you
Take
so
care,
much.
everyone.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye.